Hi, this is Kay, and today I wanted to go over, give you a little tutorial on the supply list that I'm providing for you. And as I was reading it, I thought, maybe it may not sound really clear to you. So let me show you the supply list, okay? And that way you could see what I'm talking about probably a little bit better. So first of all, I want to let you know that there's no need for you to go out and buy all these things. I hope you could gather some things around that you have in your house. And so in this workshop, we're going to be making skulls and bats from brown grocery bags. And then I thought about the brown grocery bags, though, does require a few little steps to get it ready for that. So I outlined two different ways that you could make this. And I know that this is a really fun project for children. And so the first way that I thought about was, especially if the kids, they don't want to go and paint the brown paper bags. You could see this little skull that I have here is made from colored paper. And so if you, I'm sure that you have some colored papers at home, and I would, I think it would be just fine for the kids to make these little fun bats and skulls just using the colored paper, construction paper. So for me, I just kind of bought a little stack of paper, but I'm sure you have lots of these around the house. And then the way that I have showing a picture is a skulls and bats made out of brown grocery bags, and they are painted. And then so what I do is I sew around the edge of it, and I just stuff it with a little bit of cotton, and that gives it a little puffy, kind of a puffier look. Let me just go get one and show you. So here's a couple of them. And so as you can see that I have mine, these are made out of brown paper bags, and I've sewn around the edge with a sewing machine to puff them up. But that's not necessary. If you have a sewing machine, you could go ahead and do that after our class on your own. I'm sure they're pretty simple to sew around. And if you don't have one, just make them flat. And it's not necessary to stuff them. So I just want to give you some various options in what you could do. So the brown paper bag, I wanted to show you, it does tell you that what you do with your paper bag is, this is a picture of one that I drew. And what you do is there's a little seam in the back of the paper bag, and you would cut this out. You would take your large scissors and cut this right down to here. You would remove the handles, and then right down here is a little square piece, and I would just cut that whole thing out. So then once you do that, you just open up the bag. And when you open up the bag, then you would cut strips of paper. I don't know, I just cut them in lots of different sizes, but I probably recommend 6 by 6, 5 by 6, and you could just look at the template that you will get with this class, and you could just see how big you should make them. But they're pretty much, if you do 6 by 6, you're really safe. And so here's one that I cut 6 by 6, and then so if you want to use the brown grocery bags, what you'd have to do is you would have to paint the bags first to get your colors to really pop out. And so there are two different ways that you would do it. So if you want to make a orange or yellow or blue skull, then you would first have to paint it with white. So then let me show you what it looks like. Let me see. Well, here, other side of this. Here, I painted this with white. And you could get this with either a white acrylic paint. I have one right here. or you could do it with what we call a gesso. And gesso is something that people use to paint their canvas to give it a base. And gesso is also white, and it's not as refined as the acrylic paint, but it's just a really good thing to put on to cover up. And so you could either use either one of them. So I just thought that I'd show you both. And so if you have one of these at home, that'll be great. But otherwise, you'd probably have to go and pick one up. Okay, so then one set will be painted white, and then and it would remain white because you're going to now either color the top of this with, colored acrylic paint or watercolor paint, whatever you like. But we could paint over this whole thing, and then we will cut the pieces out. And then the other, for the bats, here's a brown paper bag, and I kind of painted, I've been experimenting, so I've been painting a couple different things. And I used a watercolor, black watercolor, and then I used a black watercolor gouache. It's just a little bit thicker than watercolor, but they're still part of watercolor. And I found out that if I do this in black, I don't really need to give it a white undercoat. I noticed that it looks really good without it. So I wanted to show you that. And then when I talk about, watercolors and gouache and that kind of thing, just, any kind of a watercolor palette that you have at home is fine. I mean, I'm just going to show you one. And this is a watercolor. And then this one here is called a gouache. And this is also watercolor, but it is just a little bit more opaque than watercolor. And so, I have both of these, so I use them, according to how I want to use it. But it's up to you. I don't really want to tell you to get any of these things because you might have some things at home that you have. And then when I talk about, let me see, on my list, yeah, I tell you that there are two different ways to make this, either using a brown paper bag, and if it's too much for kids, then they could also just use a construction paper. And let's see now. So, and then the way that you would apply anything on large pieces of paper or, on large piece, then I would use a sponge brush applicator, or you could use, and I have it in the supply list here, I talk about a square tipped large watercolor brush. Well, they kind of look like this, or you might have a larger one. And maybe there's a guy in your house that has some paint brushes that maybe he uses for different things. And so look around the house. And so, it's really, it saves time if you use one of these instead of one of these little ones, right? So I just recommended, that you use one of these. And then other than this, I mean, you would have to, I really encourage you to bring anything you have at home and bring it with you. And so that, the fun part of doing art project is you don't have to use any particular thing. I just have a whole bunch of things that I use, and I just try to see what works out the best. And another thing is, let me see if I have it here. No, here it is, I have it. I collect a whole bunch of collage paper because it is so much fun to make things, and then go ahead and what I do is I open up my little box and I have my little treasure of things. And if you notice, they're just little scraps of paper, and here it could be a little leftover from something. I think I might have like a music sheet and magazine cutouts and things that I just splattered by myself with paint. And I just kind of collect all these things in this little box. so that I could cut them out and paste them on things. And so I think that this would be really fun for you to do. Just start looking around and you find old music sheets and old books, cut them out, newspaper, tissue paper, wrapping paper that maybe you have stored up and tried to save those for some reason. But anyway, there's just a lot of little things that you could look around the house, and instead of throwing away little scraps, save them, because we could use them in this class. Let's see, what else? I think that's about it. Oh, and then I talk about, bring crayons. You could bring, any kind of set of crayons. I can't find mine right now to show you, but I know you know what crayons look like. Then I talk about markers. And again, I'm sure you have markers at home. My favorite markers are Posca markers because they go over everything. They're very opaque. And then Tombow, these are called Tombow markers, brush markers. And these are really great too because they're kind of like a water-based markers. And you could this is what the markers look like. And so this might be fun to use. But you notice that they don't cover really large areas, but they, you could make little flowers. And if you do small things, this is really great. Okay, and then on the other hand, the Posca markers are a little bit more pointed. And if you notice, they're very solid looking. And it just goes over everything. So it's not necessary for you to have any of these, but I just wanted to show you some things that I use. And I hope that kind of clarifies things for you. And just really know that you're not really required to buy anything. Just bring whatever you have around the house and let's just put it together and see what we could come up with. I think you'll end up to be a really fun way for us to work together and try to use the supplies that we have. All right, I hope that clears things up for you. Thank you.